shout out to Erling Strand and Fred Pallison for bringing us all together here tonight. Erling has long been a hero of mine. He's done amazing work on behalf of UFO research. He's brought it justification. He's brought the attention of scientists around the world to this beautiful valley here in Norway. So let's have a big hand for Erling. Fred is an amazing logistician. He's brought all these people together. He's drummed up all kinds of energy for the project. And because of Fred's hospitality and welcoming attitude, we're all here today. So let's have a big hand for Fred. Let's have a big hand for all of you who show interest. Get off your butts and come here. Interest in the Hessdalen Valley Lights. It's one of the driving forces in my interest in UFOs and UAP. And it's like a dream to actually be here and be, walk in the steps of the valley and look at the amazing landscape. And over the years, I have researched a hypothesis that there may be a living element, a biological element to some UFOs. There are a lot of hypotheses about UFOs and UAPs, and this particular one I think holds a lot of promise for research in the future. It was originally proposed by the U.S. Air Force in 1947 when they first studied UFOs and Project Saucer. They said many acted like animals more than anything else. And the fellow who first saw UFOs over Mount Rainier, and Kenneth Arnold, who coined the term flying saucers, his sighting coined the term flying saucers, he studied them for the rest of his life, and he concluded that they were natural fauna of the atmosphere, like fireflies moving through the atmosphere. And the first astronauts moving around the Earth saw glowing things moving across the atmosphere, and they thought that they might be critters, living critters up in the atmosphere. So I think this hypothesis has a lot of promise, and I'd like to show you a little bit about where it might go. There really isn't a current science of aerobiology. Right now in the United States, you can obtain a master's degree in marine biology at more than 100 universities. But the number of United States university programs where you can obtain a master's degree in atmospheric biology or aerobiology is currently 0. This field of science is totally ignored, and I think it's an area where we really need to explore and develop it. This is a cross-section of the height of the Earth's atmosphere. Down here where airplanes fly, and we have arbitrary zones, but this shows it extends up to 700 miles above the Earth's surface. Now, scientists have detected the Earth's atmosphere reaching beyond the moon at this point. There's really no limit. There's no hard edge at the edge of the atmosphere. The atmosphere has 5 million times more volume than all the planet's oceans. It's a vast and fluid habitat. And when we think of, what's that cursor doing on there? When we think of the ocean, we think of all the incredible marine life that's in the ocean, and we think of the oceans being separate from the atmosphere, but there's really not a hard line between the ocean and the atmosphere. It's more of an interface where gas becomes fluid, becomes gas, becomes fluid, so there's constant exchange of vapor and liquid between the ocean and the atmosphere. In the ocean, some of the most successful forms of life are the marine invertebrates, like jellyfish and squid. Jellyfish, or gelatinous invertebrates, comprise over 90% of biomass in mid-level ocean waters. They're an incredibly successful species, an incredibly successful family of life. Squid and other cephalopods are some of the apex predators in the ocean. Both of these forms of life use bioluminescence. They reproduce in multiple ways, and when they are mature, they are apex predators that devour just about any other species around. These are incredibly successful species. When I started looking at UFO evidence, it was when VHS tapes and a lot of exploitation UFO tapes were becoming popular. I did a thorough survey of a lot of UFO videos and evidence, and I seemed to notice that a lot of them didn't look like craft. They seemed to look like animals, like marine invertebrates. So I started to study the parallels between the different things, UFOs and marine invertebrates. And I found out that they seem to resemble each other in at least 10 specific ways. In one way, UFOs resemble marine invertebrates in appearance. They have disc shapes, they have rod shapes, which seem to resemble jellyfish, the disc-shaped jellyfish, and the rod-shaped squid or cuttlefish. They have tentacles, they often have trailing tails, so they kind of look like marine invertebrates. This particular one is kind of interesting. That looks like a jellyfish. This particular one was filmed over Brazil, as was the first one. This thing was hovering over this couple looking at them. This is an interesting one where it changed shape over time, and you can see that the protrusions kind of extend and become more defined over time. The second way they resemble marine invertebrates is their use of bioluminescence. Marine invertebrates use bioluminescence to hunt, to attract prey, for mating purposes. It looks like this guy's coming down to the street light and trying to make some woo with it. He looks like he's trying to attract its attention. So this UFO is coming down to the street light, and he's flashing his light. Here's another classic UFO coming up over the British landscape. And you can see this is the classic glowing UFO. It glows from within. The third way that marine invertebrates resemble UFOs is in the way they move. A lot of people report UFOs as pulsing, changing shape, or swimming in the atmosphere. Some people say they seem to pulse, move up and down like jellyfish. This particular one, it hovered in the air for a long time, but as you can see, it's not just hovering there. The shape, the outside bell of the thing is actually kind of undulating and changing. And you can also see bioluminescence here as its light gets brighter. This is a beautiful shot of a UFO. It's hovering here like effortlessly in the sky until it decides to just go flying away. And there it goes. The next way UFOs resemble marine invertebrates is in their individual behavior. They seem to have some kind of curiosity in people, in planes, in cars. These are a couple of classic clips that I think really show how they are interested in planes. The first clip was filmed from a plane that was filming an airline commercial for the SST, the supersonic transport. This object comes up, goes along the outside of the plane, looks in the windows, and then zips off. Here a UFO seems to be trailing F-16, pacing it through the atmosphere until it drops down into the clouds. So individually, UFOs seem to show some kind of intelligent behavior. They also resemble marine invertebrates in the way they behave in groups. Here are a couple of them interacting. Now I'm sure if one's protecting the other or eating the other or what we're seeing here. Here are two that are swimming around each other as they move up through the atmosphere. And the next is a group of UFOs moving around a streetlight. Perhaps they're competing for the attention of the streetlight with mistaken identity like the other UFO before. But there's a group of them that interact with each other, and this is common behavior with UFOs. The sixth way that UFOs resemble marine invertebrates is how they have life cycles and populations. They seem to appear sometimes instantly by the millions, or the thousands at least. And these are some examples of what they call flotillas or armadas or swarms of UFOs. And sometimes they will appear out of nowhere. This is an example of what seems to be some form of reproduction. This thing bursts and three separate moving objects emerge from within it. This next clip shows an object that's expelling some kind of material, whether these are seeds or eggs or something else, we're not sure. But this is like marine invertebrates. They have a very complex life cycle. Sometimes they are very, very tiny, and then when conditions are right, they will explode into maturity and appear in large numbers. The seventh way UFOs resemble marine invertebrates is the way they feed and hunt. UFOs sometimes seem to attack humans. This is a case in Australia where a light picked up a car and dropped it. Here's a case of, again, bioluminescence in France. This UFO floated across the highway. Let me pause this here. It floated across the highway. This poor guy, him and his mother and his family were picked up by this thing. And they dropped the car. She reached outside the window and felt a spongy mass holding onto the car. This thing flashed a light as it came across the field and stunned the driver. There's a lot of reports of flashing lights attacking animals, what we call cattle mutilations. This is a case of a woman's decomposed body found high in a tree. Nobody knows how it got there. So there's a lot of evidence that there may be some attacks from these objects, like apex predators hunting from the sky. The next way that UFOs resemble marine invertebrates is in their effects on humans. These are some of the symptoms that UFO witnesses have experienced after their encounters. There are short-term and long-term physical and neurological effects, sometimes very severe. And if you overlay these with the effects on humans of marine invertebrates, they're almost exactly parallel. Marine invertebrates have very strong toxins, they have very strong digestive juices. People say being stung by some jellyfish is like being struck by a bolt of lightning. And it stuns them, and sometimes they have very severe cardiac events. And this is similar to what people experience when they get close to a UFO. And sometimes it's from far away because many jellyfish have tentacles which can extend many, many lengths beyond the main body of the organism. So if you see a UFO, I would recommend that you not approach it. Even if it looks really pretty, the lights are meant to attract you, but people have had very serious long-term effects from exposure to UFOs. The ninth way the UFOs resemble marine invertebrates is the way they leave physical traces and tracks. This is a so-called saucer nest in Australia, where a UFO had landed, this gives you an idea of the size, and left an impression in the reeds, the swirling of the reeds. This is so-called angel hair. This is like a gelatinous type substance or a fibrous substance that many UFOs have dropped. And it seems to evaporate very quickly when exposed to air. Here's an example of a close view of angel hair. And here's an example of tentacles of a jellyfish. And you can see how closely they resemble each other. Here's an example of this woman recorded these objects and there's actual strands of material coming through the sky. The 10th way that UFOs resemble marine invertebrates is they're found in likely habitats. Now, if you think of animals as liking a place to live, they like to live in a place where they have access to shelter, food, and other resources. And a lot of times they find these resources at the edges where different habitats meet. For example, at the edge of a forest, they can have the shelter and safety of the forest in a field, and they can have access to food and other materials in the field. So a lot of times we see UFOs on the surface of the ocean, the surfaces of other bodies of water, swamps and marshes, springs, mineral springs and geysers, caves and crevices, even coming out of volcanoes and geologic faults. There's been reports of so-called earthquake lights, where mysterious lights emerge from crevices in the ground, sometimes trailing tendrils, and sometimes they even seem to predict earthquakes. So if there are organisms living in the faults, they would tend to sense the oncoming earthquake before we might. So here's the hypothesis. While there may be many answers to the UFO enigma, we should consider whether many so-called UFOs are invertebrate organisms moving through Earth's atmospheric habitat. And this is how we can test the hypothesis. This is the great thing about this hypothesis, is we're not just stuck looking at past evidence, we can go forward and try and get new evidence. One is to study life-like luminous phenomena like Earth lights, mystery lights, like the Hest Island Valley lights, like the Brown Mountain lights, the Marfa lights, the Min lights, it goes on and on. We could explore likely ground-level habitats and habitat edges, springs, marshes, and faults. We can explore atmospheric habitats and habitat edges, like the edges of storms, where we see above the tops of storms, we see giant sprites. The terminator is the edge between night and day, and this is one of the Earth's greatest habitat edges. It's constantly moving around the Earth, and the resources there are beyond our ability to imagine. And The Terminator is where astronauts recorded a lot of unexplained activity, many lifelike UFOs, right as night becomes day. You can see from night into day, and you see a huge amount of activity there. So I think the ideal thing to prove this hypothesis would be to send up some kind of probe, like a deep sea submersible, to the Terminator and see if we can see something there. And the other area is to develop the new science of aerobiology, to actually get us to start looking up at the sky with the possibility that there could be living creatures up there. This is some highlights from the results of one study I helped conduct near West Point, Virginia. There is a light there that was reported called the Cohoe light. I went down there for over the course of a year. We did about 12 different investigations, field study investigations, and we recorded these lights alongside railroad tracks that run through a swamp. I heard stories about it, and we were able to actually get down there, and we recorded some things that nobody's ever recorded before. I'll go through them real quick as they come up. This light flashed at the top of a tree in reaction to a bat that was coming by. So you can see it comes down, flares, and then drops away. This is a great light. It came across the railroad tracks, it flared out, and then dwindled away to nothing. This is a daylight view of the same tracks, the same camera is oriented there. That's where the light was in exact relation to the tracks. So you can see the scale of the light. And that's how people reported this. They all said, oh, it's about this big, and it moves across the tracks. So we were lucky to have recorded. This is a light we saw just hovering over the tracks the first time we were down there. These are these green squid-like things flying through the trees faster than you can imagine. Look how fast this thing moved. This actually slowed down. This thing moves so fast. We set up a camera that took 1 second exposures. These things move this far in 1 second. This flew over our head. We didn't even know it was here. It flew out from the trees and came back to the trees all in 1 second in this one exposure. So these are some of the challenges for when we want to study aerobiology. Right now, we're fixated on a technological viewpoint for UFOs. We see things that look like metal, they look really machined or engineered, and we think it's technology. But nature is the greatest technologist, it's the greatest engineer. Some of the things that nature creates are far more refined than anything that we humans can create. So we're kind of stuck in the idea that there's some kind of craft, and we maybe need to think that maybe they're a construction of nature instead. Well, probably our biggest limitation is our limited sensory perception. We have 2 eyeballs in front of our brains with massive fat. That limits what we can perceive. And the idea that there may be things bigger and more complex and in some ways much greater than us is very hard for us to accept or even conceive of. It's hard for us to conceive of something bigger than ourselves. But there may be things faster, more resilient, and much more varied than we can even imagine. Some of these things may be invisible to our eyes in our gaseous atmosphere, and they're only visible under certain conditions. For example, when they flash or when the light hits them in a certain way. There's difficulty observing and collecting samples. If you think of how difficult it is to collect marine organisms, scientists, even now, you can't collect jellyfish. Once you take it out of its medium, out of its habitat, it simply dissolves, it sublimates and becomes vapor. So imagine how tough it would be to collect a sample of an organism flying through the air. And again, one of the greatest difficulties, even conceiving of these organisms, greater and in some ways than ourselves. So what are these considerations for Hessdalen? Do some of the lights here have biological origins? I think it's worth investigating. Are they resident? If so, if some of them are biological, are they resident? Do they live in the valley all the time? Or do they migrate in and out of the valley? Are they on a seasonal cycle or another cycle, a bigger cycle, like a cosmic cycle that we don't even know about yet? And what resources unique to this region could be vital to their lives? Water, shelter, food, minerals. And can we identify their habitats to better observe them? So that's the hypothesis. And I'd like to share with you a recent finding that we had. We've been here, we've been going out having some fun over this week. There's an old sulfur mine down by the river. This is what it looks like in the daylight. Now, this is kind of complex, but there's a connection between UFOs and sulfur that I thought was worth exploring. So we thought, well, let's go down here. This is an interesting habitat. You can see there's a little bit of shelter, there's moisture, there's vegetation, there's soil all around here. We went down and put out 10 different lights, little, just cheap little puck lights, you know, that you put under your cupboards or whatever. And then we put a time-lapse camera up. So this is what it looks like in the daytime. This is as it's starting to get dark, you can see where the lights are. They were purple lights. We're hoping to get something that might show up. This is what it looks like at night. And you can see the lights cause some of the vegetation to glow a little bit. And we looked through and we saw a lot of different green flashes. We saw actually something that looked a lot like the yellow light that you were talking about. It was like a bright yellow, just like an upright thing moving by. And then we caught this on one frame. You see this little green guy here. And then the next frame, he was gone. This is what he looks like when you enlarge him. There's a lot of pixelation here. This is just a screen capture. We went and just looked at this today and put out this information and brought it here. So anyway, this is just an example. In our limited time here, we found something that might be promising. Ryan will probably tell you what this really is. But we think it's promising. Just this one simple study might point the way to look at some of the crevices and habitats in the valley that might provide homes to some of this atmospheric light. There are so many different environments in the valley. And I think we want to look in the sky and see things that are clear up there. But invertebrates they have a long period of life cycle where they're small and they're mobile, and there's a lot of them, and they might be in among the forest, in the marshes, in the swamps that are there. When we were up walking on top of the mountains, I was struck by how much the lichen up there resembled coral at the bottom of an ocean. And NASA, when they first started studying the atmosphere, they called their study This New Ocean. So I want to commend you folks here. You're pioneers in the study of this, and one of the reasons I'm here is to learn about your techniques and hopefully take some of the opportunities here, some of the methods you're using, and try and deploy them at other locations around the world. So I thank you very much for, yes, sir?
What is the exposure time of this picture? Do you know that?
Was it 1/30th of a second? That it was 30 frames per second?
Well, we're running one frame every 2 seconds, but the actual exposure time, I don't have that right here, so I don't want to speculate it.
Yeah, I'm
We
not
can
sure
get
the
that for you.
actual-
That's a fair question. We literally just got this information today.
Yeah.
Okay, it could be interesting to know if it's a small green spot moving, or if the form is just how the light was
Yeah.
form of it.
One of the things we wanted to see if there was anything worth looking further at. And so I think if you wanted to look at some of the different habitats, we'd probably get more refined equipment, maybe a higher speed camera to try and reveal something. Anyway, I think that there's a lot of promise ahead for the study of aerobiology. I don't know if it's going to provide the results that we hope for, and it might lead to even more questions, but I think it would be fun to take the journey. So thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to. So thanks a lot. Any questions? Yes.
You suggested that there is some kind of nutrients in the atmosphere, especially at the daylight temperature. What kind of nutrients do you see there?
There's a lot of pollen, insects, even migratory birds, even some of the chemicals. Some jellyfish are actually photosynthetic. They have symbiotic algae that live within the organism that they use sunlight to produce nutrients.